Hi, guys. This is Dr. Scott Young, and today we have a special guest, and we have Dr. Meri Crouley, and she's got a lot of backgrounds in a couple areas from Hollywood, and she talks a lot about a huge amount of information, something that I really don't have a lot of background in, and really in the film industry. That I mean, I'm a fiction writer, but we're going to talk about the film industry and what it can be like post-NESARA. So you're going to see this coming right up here. So hold on one sec. Well, so how you been doing today?
Yeah, hey, Dr. Scott. I'm doing awesome. We're living the dream out here in LA, the city of angels. We're taking it by force. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and it says the violent take it by force, meaning, we take the kingdom for God.
Something I've been thinking about with LA and what's been happening, when you think about LA and as we move into that post-NESARA thing or the post-EBS stuff, and when the world really hears about all of the craziness and the sickness that comes out of some of the major cities, and LA's got to go through its bit of its purge. Do you feel like, so I mean, I'm going to kind of hit you with the first question, and you've been feeling this. How do you feel like the purge might occur for LA? Do you feel like that it might, go through that purge and come through and say, you know what, we've really made it? Or do you feel like it might really regenerate itself in a different way? How do you feel about that?
Well, Scott, I think that, God told me that the greatest show on earth was getting ready to come, and he's going to show up and show off. So this city, LA and Hollywood, it basically has always been a city that has really brought content to the world in the past. The beginning of Hollywood had some great movies, like the Ten Commandments, King of Kings, and then little by little it started the media started being the mainstream media, or some people call it the lamestream media or fake news, started putting out content which brainwashed people in the wrong way. So there's a number of people here in Los Angeles and in Southern California that have been standing up for truth. So personally, I think that we're going to see it flipped. Right now, Scott, there's a writer's strike that happened,
Right.
and also now there's a screen actors guild strike. So pretty much the industry has been shut down, and so I believe that God is rolling out the red carpet for His movies, for God's films. And Scott, He told me that the greatest movies have yet to be released. So any purge, I mean, I don't think it's just going to be the big cities. I think there's going to be a purge around the world that people
Yeah.
are going to wake up. The Great Awakening. Great Awakening is going to happen. And so, He's going to protect His people. So, I don't ever look at it in the negative. Whatever kind of purge there's going to be, I think the whole world is going through a purge. So,
Right. That's a good point. That's a great point. So talk to me a little bit about your background in the film industry.
well, Scott, it was years ago, God spoke to me and told me to start doing television and going on TV. And so I actually started going to film school and just started learning everything I could about it, and bought a camera. And so I'm speaking to people watching. Sometimes you get these holy hunches, I call them, that, God wants to give you the desire of your heart. And I believe we're at a point that there's going to be a great renaissance after the Great Reformation with Martin Luther and the attack, the 95 Theses on the Chapel of the Door in Wittenberg, he went through a lot of persecution, a lot of bad things happened, but because he stood up for truth, it was shortly thereafter that a great renaissance happened. So I believe that we're in this time that God is going to bring a renaissance. And so I just started kind of learning everything I could. And, I had a background that I used to work at teleproduction facilities and different things when I was younger. I got married and had 3 kids. So kind of stepped away from it to raise my family. But there came a point that God said to get back into the game again. So, over the last 20 years, I've probably produced about 2,000 television programs around the world. And, I've just recently come out with my first film called Freedom Cry. But see, it's not about how much experience we have. When God says to do it, we just do it. And all of a sudden, we don't know what he can do through us as we're just faithful and obedient. So he told me, Scott, to build a studio that would rival Disney and call it Destiny. And Disney and Destiny have the same alphabetical letters, but Destiny has a T, which stands for the cross. So
Right,
I
right.
believe God is going to bring in his kingdom instead of magic kingdom. He's going to bring in God's kingdom, and we're going to see a great move, including, with young children, because, they're really trying to go after these kids right now. And we've got to stand up as the parents. We have to stand up again, and grandparents, we have to stand up against what they're trying to do to our children in particular right now.
So when you think about, when we have that great renaissance too, and obviously Martin Luther is where we pull that thing from in the 1500s, and it's that time frame when we come out of the we come into the age of reason, and that kind of idea. We're going to be coming into that in that post-NESARA time frame after the EBS, and after I believe in a pre-tribulational time frame where the kingdom of God is going to really grow up until we have that tribulation time frame. So when you think about things that God is stirring in your heart, and when we think about movies, they've been very vapid. When we think about, like, I joke about like Rocky 34, and these movies that you're just like, can we stop remaking movies? I mean, like Snow White came out, and they're going, that they, it's not about the true love's first kiss, and you got like the evil stepmother is not even, supposed to be the ugly stepmother, and it's really the beautiful woman, and really the not very pretty, Snow White. And you're going, come on. I mean, can't you, if you want to make another movie, go for it, but it's so stupid. It does, and no one even goes to these movies anymore.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Snow White because years ago, Scott, God told me, one day I woke up and I heard the voice of God who speaks to you in a still small voice. And I heard him say something very unusual. He said to me, the church is where Snow White was. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he said, most of the church is hiding and most of the church is asleep. And I'm getting ready to kiss her, that she's going to take her rightful destiny. Jesus, the Prince of Peace, and we're going to come take our authority in the kingdom. So a friend of mine named Michael Ashley said to me just a month or so ago, somebody introduced me to him, and he said that, do you know, Meri, that most of the Disney stories are so old that they're out of copyright and they're public domain? So he actually started doing, like, he did Beauty and the Beast. He made, the Christian Beauty and the Beast. He did Pinocchio, a number of other things. But I told him my Snow White story, and he just did my Snow White story, and I just got it in the mail yesterday. And it's Snow White only from God's perspective. And instead of the 7 dwarfs, actually there's 7 children that get rescued, that come to Snow White that had been trapped. And
Wow.
freedom, liberty. It's just unbelievable. And there is the wicked, of course, stepmother. But he developed this whole story out of the content that I gave him, and then added a little bit to it. But it's actually something people can get on Amazon, and it's amazing. We're flipping what the enemy meant, and yeah, I did hear about their new Snow White. Snow White is Hispanic, and that's okay. I mean, you know, we
Yeah,
don't
I
care.
don't care about that really. I mean, even though it doesn't fit with the old Germanic tale that she was a lily white,
Right.
kid, but I mean, I could almost live with that one. But they're
Yeah.
going with the complete woke
Well, they
ridiculous.
have the seven dwarfs, a couple more transgender. I mean,
Yeah,
they're really pushing this narrative. And I actually have something that was just sent to me yesterday that shows that their ideology of what they're trying to do. I mean, Disney now has been over 100 years. They're celebrating their 100-year, you know, that they've been around. And, I've always loved Disney in the past, but the last few years, you really started seeing what was behind it and what they're really trying to do right now. And it's not just Disney, it's actually in the schools. They're trying to promote an LGBT narrative. It's
right.
actually a religion, not just, Disney, a number of things. So we have to really stand up against it because, God made male and female, and this is about the family. God made a family unit. And so anyway, I've got a clip. I don't know if we can try to play it. I tried to send it over to you.
Yeah, and it didn't come through with that, and we'll get to that. But I want to kind of, I want to kind of have you move into this a little further because, it's like Hollywood can taste what success is, but they don't really feel it. I mean, like the Sherwood Baptist people, I remember, got to be like 10 years ago, was putting out some of these movies, and they they understand what movie writing is, what good movie writing is. Sherwood Baptist, put out these low budget movies that were killing it in the movie theaters, right?
You
And
mean the Kendrick brothers? Is that what you're
yeah,
talking
the Kendrick brothers, right? And they were killing it in the movie theaters. And at the same time, Hollywood was trying to put out some idiot, like idea of some, choir singing kind of thing that flopped in the movie theaters because they had no answer to the tear-jerking response of a family type of movie, of what the Kendrick brothers were kind of doing. And I'm going, they just don't get how to touch the heart of the man or touch the heart of a woman. And I go, is that what you're talking about in the Great Renaissance kind of thing here too?
Well, the Kendrick brothers, the first film they did was Facing the Giants, and it was a very low budget movie. One of my friends, actually, Chris Bueno, he had gotten, saw the film, and he actually presented to, I forget what company, but he was looking for a song that they could use in the film. And I wasn't going to talk about the story, but it's coming up to me now. And so the person that was in charge of, I forget what it was, this little budget film, and it so resonated with it, this football story about facing the Giants with faith and everything. And he actually picked it up and actually brought it into distribution, and that's what got him on the map. I think the first film was like 60,000 or something, very, very low budget. And so then they went on to do like Courageous and a number of other ones. And I love their stories, the Kendrick brothers, but basically their stories are mostly for Christians and believers.
Right.
But I believe now that there's going to be films that are going to cross over. Like you had brought up Rocky earlier.
Right.
I've studied the history of film. Sylvester Stallone, who was, kind of an actor that, did a lot of these low budget films. And he had seen, actually had watched a fight between Muhammad Ali and I forget the guy's name. He was a white boxer, Caucasian boxer, that they didn't expect him, Scott, to last maybe a round or two. And
Right.
what happened was this guy ended up going the distance. He went the whole, I think, 12 rounds. And he was so inspired. The guy didn't win. Muhammad Ali won by, a decision, but he wrote Rocky after watching that, that fight.
Sure was.
And
It was excellent. It's 19 I remember it was
it
1977
was in the 70s.
or something like that, or whatever.
So I want to tell you the story. So I know the story. What happened? Chartoff and Winkler, they're a production. They were a production team. That Sylvester was actually doing an audition. He was leaving, and Mr. Chartoff said, "Hey, Sylvester, what's going on?" He said, "I just wrote a script," and he goes, "Well, send it over." They read it, Scott, and they thought, "Wow, this is great." And so now at this point, he was really broke. I mean, he was like at the time, really needed the money. So they offered him quite a bit of money to buy the script. And he said, "You don't understand. I need to play Rocky." And they kind of said, "Well, sorry, we want Ryan O'Neal or Burt Reynolds or whatever, one of the well-known actors at the time." And so they kept on offering him more money until finally, it was an exorbitant amount of money for the time. And he said to himself, "Listen, if I would have sold that just for money, I would have never, ever forgiven myself knowing that I was meant to
Right,
play that role."
right,
And so finally, there was a boxing gym out of Philadelphia that called Mr. Chartoff and said, "Listen, we'll give you $1.1 million if you'll do the movie in our boxing gym here." And that's what happened. And they did it really low budget, but they got Bill Conte, the whole Rocky theme song. That was actually gladiator music, like dun 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 dun. Dun. Without that music, it wouldn't have been the same.
right.
And what happened was that it actually went to the point where it was actually at 1.10 Academy Awards. It was up for Best Picture, Best Actor. He actually got a Best Actor award. He didn't win,
Yeah.
but he didn't win Best Picture. But this is one other story I want to tell you. For those of you that are watching this film right now, it's really important that we go the distance, even with what we believe in about NESARA and everything that's getting ready to happen for the flip. They were at the Directors Guild, Scott, and he was with his mother, Jackie, who I've met before. And they were in the back row. They screened the film. The lights went up. There wasn't a sound in the place. They all filed out, and he hung his head, like that. This was my time. He felt like a flop. And his mom said, "Maybe next time, honey." And he said, "Mom, this was my time." And so they waited till everyone was out. And then they walked out. In the Directors Guild, there's a spiral staircase that goes down to the foyer. Where as he walked out, Scott, they were all waiting for him, and they cheered as he walked out because they knew that this unknown actor, writer, this was a hit. And that during that
Right.
history, I was, but during time in history, all the movies had been really dark. That was the first film that came out that gave hope. Remember, he was
Yep.
praying in the
Yep.
bathroom, and he didn't even technically win, really. Apollo Creed won, but in the eyes of the people, he won.
He
And
made a difference. I mean, there are a few movies over a time frame. Even we had I remember back in '97 when you had Saving Private Ryan, that same kind of thing that had the movie people. I mean, I'm a World War II buff, and that was one of the most realistic movies for seeing what happened on the beaches of Normandy. And that kind of realism puts you back in that time frame, and
right,
and that kind of seeing that kind of renaissance it's not just about um making good movies, but I believe that we need to have bring in the real history of America and the real history of the world so that we know what really is happening. And I'm going to
well, and
throw
that's
something out at you. I
yeah,
want to throw something out at you here because
sure,
there are going to be realities that we are going to learn. Um, we are going to learn histories about JFK shooting that are going to freak us out. We are going to learn issues of 9/11. We are going to learn things about the election issues. We are going to learn things about COVID. We are going to learn things and the involvement of Bush Sr., Poppy Bush. We might even learn things about Joe Biden and maybe even JFK, that he could have been involved with JFK's shooting, that could make you, like, want to change his diaper, kind of thing. And some of those movies are going to have to be involved with that. And so that's why I'm trying to say movies might be able to be the great communicator in that way too. And so, I mean, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, and also one of my other favorite movies, and it's also another classic, is Field of Dreams. Right now,
Right.
Dad pitched hardball baseball until he was 82, and he died of leukemia at 84 a few years ago. And God told me, Scott, that he's going to pitch motion pictures, and that he's going to bring us out of the dugout. We're going to get on base. We're going to hit a grand slam, and all of heaven's going to do the wave. Do you
Right.
remember that story? He was in the fields, and he heard the voice say, "If you build it, he will come."
Yeah.
And so he did, and then, plowed down part of his cornfield and built this beautiful, baseball field.
Right.
Then, it got winter and nothing happened, and it looked dark, and the brother was like saying, "We don't have enough money. You're going to have to sell your farm." And that's where we're at right now, I believe.
Yes.
Everyone's like, "It looks dark. I don't think we're going to make it." And
Right.
this is just a story. But remember, I know the story so well. I've probably seen that movie 50 times.
Yeah.
He's told to go out and find a writer named Terrence Mann, and he goes out, and at first the guy tells him, "You're crazy," but then he's told to take him to a baseball game.
Yes.
And he finally goes, and in the 7th inning on the scoreboard, it says, "Go the distance." See, this is the message today to you guys watching, is go the distance. And, he brings him back with him, to Iowa. And the story, it's a beautiful story. At the end of the movie, his father comes back, who never got to play his dream. He never got to play baseball because he had to go into war. My dad was in the same scenario. He came back from, he actually pitched baseball exhibitions and played with Elston Howard. And, he basically entertained the troops. They were 25 wins and 0 losses. At 25, when he came back, he felt he was too old to play.
Wow.
And he started playing around the state of Minnesota. And he started a business, was successful, but he fell on some ice, broke his ankle, and he was a day away from having it amputated, Scott. And he, for 20 years, quit playing baseball. At 52, he got back into the game and played hardball baseball for 3 decades, 30 years, and his record was only 2.5 men on base the whole career. They wrote him up in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune. They did a news package on him on KSTP. And so what I'm telling you people watching today is that it's time to get back into the game again.
Yeah.
It's for us to go the distance, that we can't lose, because God says if he's for us, who can be against us? So as bad as it looks right now, we have to believe that we are winners, and that things are going to flip, and that we are going to see the greatest show on earth.
Oh my gosh, that is so good stuff. That's some great stuff. You guys need to be encouraged just by that message. Okay, so let's shift the gears a little bit here. So instead of this current form, and you kind of pushed it out there with this, and we kind of pushed this, and she's going to share with us a little bit of something that happened here. What kinds of children's films without the Disney influence? Do you want to kind of just play on your phone that little clippy thing that we had there, that was kind of presented at maybe a school board meeting?
Right. And I'm going to say, I met a gentleman recently, God's connected me with all these former Disney people, interestingly enough. And there's a guy named Davey, who actually was the first Chinese animator that was hired. And he worked at Disney for 10 years, even worked on The Lion King and all these other stories. And he actually wrote a children's story about Noah's Ark from the animals' perspective. And he presented it to, Disney, and they liked it, but they wanted to make 2 of the animals, they brought the animals in 2 by 2, and male and female. And they wanted, some of the animals to be 2 females, 2 men. And he already saw, in 2000, what they were doing. So he quit, and he basically put together a whole team of like 12 children's stories. 6 of them are already in book format. And the first film, called The Giant Leaf, I believe that, I'm linking arms with him along with some other films I'm doing. So these are universal films that are going to actually, not just for Christians, but Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, whatever. It has a universal story of faith, not quitting, but it's wholesome. And so anyway, that's where this Disney thing versus Destiny Film Studio. So somebody sent me this clip yesterday, Scott, and I'm actually doing an event in Chicago coming up. And Sheila Holm, we just added her as one of the speakers, Sheila Holm. And so she sent me this clip. Let me just play it really quick. We tried to get it to you, but it wasn't playing. Hopefully we'll get it loud enough.
Thank you, I'm Ellen Bergman. I'm the co-chair of the entertainment division at Disney, and we have a special announcement to make today. As you know, Disney's a place of magic. It's where frogs turn into princes, where orphans like Cinderella can transform into beautiful princesses. And unlike us jaded adults, the children believe in magic. And we spent 100 years cultivating a brand that has been trusted and loved by families for generations. And with that trust, we've covertly been inserting queerness into our films and television shows. First as LGBTQ background characters, and later in leading roles and plot. And few parents know that 2 years ago now, for Pride Month, on Disney Plus, our streaming service, we streamed the Disney Plus Drag Queen Extravaganza to help introduce queer ideologies and sexualities to the children and encourage them to experiment on their own. And we're proud of our perfect DEI score, our diversity, equity, and inclusion score, but we always strive to go above and beyond what is expected. And so we're proud to announce that this summer we're going to be opening Disney-themed pediatric transgender clinics for the children across the country. As you know, there's still a tremendous stigma against parents deciding to change the gender of their children, especially.
Yeah, so I mean that was unbelievable. But
Yeah.
It's
where the agenda is. And so when that pendulum swings away from that craziness kind of thing, we're going to see, people are going to say no to all the Disney things. What kinds of things are the kids going to do? What do you foresee the kids saying, or parents saying with the kids? Well, how do you perceive that?
Well, first of all, I think we have to be the ones that stand up and say, no, we're not going to go. A lot of already Disney, their films like Buzz Lightyear, they ended up putting 2 females that got married, and the movie bombed. You go woke, you go broke. I mean, people are canceling from Disney Plus. They're canceling a lot of their stuff. They're having to sell off. They had to, let go of 7,000 employees. I mean, so the thing is, they're pushing this thing fast and furious because, as I mentioned, it's a religion.
Right.
It's a religion. And so we, the people, have to stand up and say no. And so really, we're the ones that have to push the narrative. We have to be the ones. Like, God was the most creative. I mean, he's the creator. The Christians or the believers should be the most creative people in the world. But oftentimes in the past, Scott, the Christian movies have been far, less superior than what Hollywood has put out.
Right.
That's why I believe that we're going to bring in these great content. And so I see things flipping. Like, even I'm working on a film. The Jesus Revolution film came out in February, and it's the story about Chuck Smith, Calvary Chapel, and God taking this hippie named Lonnie Frisbee that had erupted into something known as the Jesus movement. Well, I have a film called The Prodigal that I've been working on for over 15 years. The average movie in Hollywood takes 12 to 14 years to make. People don't realize that. Some are a lot quicker.
Really?
Yeah, the average movie takes 12 to 14 years to make, from inception of the idea and the thought to getting the script done. And then, so it's sometimes a long time. So that's why I kept bringing up the theme of go the distance, because we're quit. And we have to be the ones. We're in a battle right now for the hearts and souls of America and the world, and of the 7 Mountain message. You know, Bill Bright, who started Campus Crusade for Christ years ago, and you know, he already was many people on the campuses. He was affecting thousands, if not millions, of students. And in the mid 70s, God came to him, along with Lauren Cunningham of Youth with a Mission and Francis Schaeffer. They each were told within a 2-week period, if you want to change the world, you need to change the 7 mountains, or the 7 pillars of society. And, you know, that's like the mountain of religion, the mountain of government, the mountain of education, you know, but the mountain of arts and entertainment and the mountain of media are the 2 hardest mountains to take, because Satan is the prince of power of the air. So
Right.
use the media to really propagate this fear that has come out in the last few years. And we now need to take it back. And, you know, he's always telling me that the greatest show on earth, that we're going to see things change, and the greatest movies, the greatest music, the greatest TV shows are going to become from his kingdom, not the magic kingdom, but God's kingdom. And so I believe we have to really have faith to believe, like, hey, there's giants in the land, but there are 5 smooth stones of faith. We're going to take down that giant. We're going to cut off the head, and we're going to be the ones that are now going to produce this content that will change the culture.
Well, I also kind of believe, and I'm putting this out there for people to to tell you a couple things. Number one, the content's there in the hearts of the people. Number two, there has been suppressed content that has already been out there by thousands of people who have already put it out on very, very low budget kinds of things that just put it out on a YouTube channel, or put it out on a Rumble channel, and just had like a documentary, you know, on a particular kind of conversation, and or basically put it out there with a with an audible message, you know, maybe wrote an audio book kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so those are available for movie theaters. And I'm not talking about movie, just, you know, I'm being broad in that kind of term, but
Right.
those are available for that to come out. I mean, you know, frankly, I have you know, I've written fiction before, and you know, so I have, you know, I have an issue that happened to me 3.5 years ago, where I came down with right before COVID issues, where I had a severe stroke, and they were berating my wife, you know, because she should have brought me in early enough, and it just happened 20 minutes earlier, that, you know, they were going, well, do you have a DNR? She was like, what? You know, it just happened. And she's a nurse, you know, and there's blood spurting everywhere because, you know, I'm ripping out my IV kind of thing. And they had no answers to it. And there were 13 separate diagnoses going on, and 13 different physicians, or a whole bunch of different physicians trying to come in, and they were faxing the results everywhere. And I walked out of the hospital completely healed in 3 days. And, you know, and you know, and frankly, only 1,100 people have watched the video. And when people have actually watched the video, that they've seen, you know, some of the information that happened, people are like, you know, and those are the kind of things that you know, can mess with your mindset of what can happen. And we have people out there that are seeking these kind of mythical things like med beds, you know, to heal you from perfection. And I'm going, you know what? The blood of Christ is way more powerful than you realize. What I'm trying to say is that there are stories and information that can be shown and told to the world, that we can go, you know what? That brings me faith, because a story can come through and can build your faith in a way that can influence a population, just like the story of Rocky.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and I think that that kind of thing gets people to kind of go, you know what? I want to, you know, when you hear something about a particular branch of service, and the CIA have done this many times, they would promote something of a particular branch of service, and then, you know, people went into the Air Force, just like, you know, we had with, you know, Top Gun. You know, they would promote a particular branch of service by that particular movie, and then people wanted to join up. And I think it's time for us to kind of say, you know what, let's get back into the values that made our country great again.
Well, and also, Scott, that you know, there's a lot of great actors. I mean, I've acted, and I was doing a lot with different classes and voiceover and this and that, and I had an agent. But you know, there's so many great actors, but so many of the ones, the celebrities and the well-known ones you see today. Now, not all of them, but there's a lot of them that took the deal. I mean, you see
Right.
people with the, you know, the one eye and the this and the
Yeah.
that. Oftentimes, they're told, "Well, listen, we'll take you into, you know, stardom, but you have to bow to what we want you to do."
Correct.
A lot of people aren't willing to bow, but a lot of the ones that have, that you see, household names, people think, oh, if I could only be that guy, that famous guy or whatever, but you
Yeah.
don't know what deals they had to do with the devil to get there. So right now there's a writer's strike, as I mentioned earlier, and an actor's strike now, Screen Actors Guild. But I believe that there's going to be great actors and talent, people that you guys have been out there, and you're just as good
Yeah.
as some of
Right.
these guys you see, but you
Right.
never got the
Do you
opportunity.
know, as a singer myself, I mean, and I'm a singer that, you know, I have a 3.5 octave range. Okay, when I don't have that my cough issues, I would listen to Saturday Night Live and go, I could sing better than three-quarters of the idiots they would bring on stage.
Mhm.
And I go, and you know, when you listen to the guy who could play the guitar in, you know, in the clubs, those are the guys that were better than any one of the guys on stage. And that's the same thing that happens that you're just explaining.
Well, and also, you know, as I've gone down the rabbit hole and really started to learn a lot of things over the last, you know, several years, you know, in the 60s, you know, at the beginning, if you really research history, you know, when TV first came out, you know, you looked at the shows they had on, you know, which I was tiny at that time, but you know, they had like Father Knows Best and My Three Sons and all these
Right.
wholesome, Leave It to Beaver, wholesome shows. But then as it started going down little by little, by the end of the 60s, you know, you started seeing introducing these different shows that they started having, you know, just I don't know, they started introducing certain things. And so the film that I'm working on, the motion picture about Lonnie Frisbee called The Prodigal, you know, a lot of the rock stars in the 60s, and I just found this out, a lot of their fathers, like Jim Morrison, his father was in the Bay of Tonga with the Vietnam War, that the false flag, his father was the one that
Correct.
was on the ship. You had like Frank Zappa, their fathers were in the military industrial complex. So the deep state actually used and propped up these ones to bring in this generation gap to cause like the LSD. You know,
Right.
LSD at one time with Timothy Leary, it was legal. And they were pushing this out there, just, you know, tune on, tune in, and drop out. They
Right.
wanted to bring in, instead of like the 50s with the, you know, all the wholesomeness and the happy days and everything, but now they wanted to be a generation gap, and they used the music, they introduced the drugs, they introduced all this stuff to bring that in. That was by design.
Exactly.
We know
I mean,
behind
the baby boomer generation was created by the greatest generation. And we always think that the greatest generation didn't want it. No, the greatest generation, and I'm not talking about the whole generation, we're talking about a very specific group of the elitists, the sickos, created the baby boomer counterculture kind of stuff. That's what you're talking about.
right. Yeah, and so now we got to take it back. They're trying to do this now to even push it further, you
Right.
know, this LGBT. But, you know, one of my friends, Angel Wilson, and I met him up in Idaho about 10 years ago. You know, he was bullied like when he was young. His mother adopted him. She wanted to have her, she had a natural born daughter. She wanted to kind of give him like her a little playmate. And this daughter, her natural born daughter, was really jealous of this new little boy that was brought into the house as an adopted brother. And so she was being teased and tormented. And he finally, people would say, "Oh, you're gay." And he finally said, "Well, if I'm, if they're telling me I'm gay, I might as well be." And a lot of people that actually become gay have been bullied.
Right.
And so what happened, he became gay. He was in Los Angeles and Hollywood after the Gay Pride Parade in 1983. Scott, he was 19 years old, and he's walking down the street, coming down off ecstasy or LSD or something. And the voice of God speaks to him. Now, he wasn't a believer. He wasn't a Christian. He hears God speak to him and started convicting him of his lifestyle. And he starts talking to God going, "Well, I can't change, God. I've tried." And this is the really critical thing. God told him, "I never called you to change. I called you to surrender."
Exactly.
And he surrendered. And now Angel got married last year. He's a minister. He wrote a book called Over the Rainbow, God's Eye for the Gay Guy. Lonnie Frisbee, the story that I'm working on, he basically was told by God that what the hippie was in the Jesus movement, because Lonnie said, in the church for so long is expecting a certain mold of what a Christian should look like, what a Christian should say, what a Christian should be. But God is blowing everybody's mind because he's saving the hippies. And nobody thought a hippie could be saved. And so now God is going to start touching the LGBT. That Angel actually has a tattoo that says LGBT, love God, be true. And not that it's okay to be gay, but that we're going to love people and God is going to come to them. They're going to surrender, and they're going to be some of the greatest apostles, prophets, pastors, and teachers that the world has ever seen, because a lot of them have been molested. A lot of them have been bullied. I mean, we know a lot of stories about this stuff. So I want to encourage those of you guys watching.
Right.
Also, this trans parent, a lot of you parents whose children are wanting to, transgender or transform into a different sex. One of my friends, Wendy, had a prophetic word from God that said that the Lord has heard the heart of the trans parent, and that they're like in a trance, and
Right.
God is getting ready to transform them, redeem them, restore them, and renew them. And so I just feel God's heart. That's why the film that I'm working on. See, Lonnie Frisbee was molested, Scott, at 8 years old in 1957. He tried to tell his mom and stepdad, and they didn't believe him. He was molested by a 17-year-old babysitter who was a man, who was a boy, and they didn't believe him. In 1957, just think of all the Catholic priests and people that they tried to tell that this was happening. They didn't believe them. And so now I just want to encourage, if you've been molested, if you've had things happen to you, people didn't believe you, God believes you. And God is going to restore and renew and redeem you. And Angel got married last year, and he and his wife, Lori, have one of the happiest marriages I know. And it was like Angel, it was so funny. I'll just finish with this story. Lori had bought his book a few years earlier, and she had been divorced and a successful businesswoman who had retired. She was a few years older, but a beautiful gal. And she read Angel's book, and she had a house that she would have ministers come through and stay at her place in her upper bedroom. And so Angel and his associate Ty, they were in town to speak at a conference. So she told God, "Listen, there's no way I'm ever going to get married again unless you literally drop him in my living room." Well, God dropped Angel right in her house, and God started telling her, "That's your husband." And like, she's like thinking like, wow. And so she takes him out to have coffee, and she tells Angel this, and Angel kind of looks at her and says, "Well, I'm not opposed to it." But he eventually had to tell her, like, "I don't know if I'm actually going to ever be able to, perform as a man, And she said, "Well, that doesn't matter." And maybe TMI, but let me tell you this, because that took kind of a stigma off, it didn't matter. It's like they got married, and it's like he said, one of the best marriages in every area,
right?
Physically. So I want you to know that God is going to redeem what the enemy is pushing on these ones. Angel is actually going to be at my event coming up in Open the Heavens in Chicago, and he's
on
going
August 18 and 19, right?
Yes, I'm doing this event in Chicago called Open the Heavens, Let God Arise. In fact, you might even be there. We'll
Right.
see. We'll see. But I've got a lot of people: Andrew Whalen, Juan O'Savin, Sheila Holm, Angel and Lori Wilson, Scott Bennett, the DoD whistleblower. So many people. But there's gonna be like a showdown. Literally, it's the 130-year anniversary of this Parliament of World Churches. That when the World's Fair was released in Chicago, they
Right.
also have this Parliament of Churches. They're meeting that very week. I didn't plan this, but it's like the prophets of Elijah with the prophets of Baal. God is doing a showdown right now, and the devil's going to go down, and God is going to put the crown on his people, and it's going to be a great wave of God's spirit and glory. He's going to tell his story, and it's not going to be gory, but it's going to be glory. And so God likes to rhyme all the time. So he uses me to rhyme. So it's actually pretty fun because God likes rhymes. So it's
I always say this though. I mean, I always say that, hey, listen, one of my favorite studies that I ever did is one of the hardest parts of the Bible that I struggled with was, be perfect as I am perfect. And I would struggle with that area because I was like, well, I'm not perfect. And you're telling me to be perfect. And God goes, you don't have to be perfect. Just walk in me and you're perfect because I am perfect in you. And then it was like, what does that mean? And what happens is that you already are perfect inside of him. And it's like this weirdest circumstance of living in the spirit. And most people have no clue about how that actually works because they're always trying to attain something of the now, and they have not seen how God really sees you already. And I know that sounds completely nuts to a lot of people. I just blew up some theology of some people because they think that they need to go confess every sin that they had. And that is actually, I just answered some of Martin Luther's response that he went through about, I don't know, 10, 12 years of his life trying to figure it out. But that is how it answers. He's already sees you as complete. And one of the things that I found that helps me in my sin life is that I actually walk up to Satan after I sin and I say, I'm the bride of Christ, and my resting place is in the temple of God. And Satan goes, he has nothing to say to that because that's my final destiny. And he doesn't know doesn't know how to answer that question. Instead of arguing with him, I just tell him where my final destiny is.
I want to just interject with something with what you just said. That's why stories are so important. That's why Jesus always told parables, because the word pictures. And years ago, my brother Mark, he constantly was struggling with alcohol addiction.
Right.
And one day the Lord spoke to me and he said to me, tell Mark that I'm proud of him because he keeps getting up again. And then God said, have you ever seen a baby walk perfectly right off the bat?
Right.
You know that the baby's going to fall. Like the parents say, get your camera, look at Johnny's going to take his first step. And when the baby takes the step and falls, you don't go, you stupid baby, why'd you fall? You go, get up again. And you don't see a child not walk unless they have some type of deformity with their legs, because everyone says, yeah, do it again, do it again. That's what God is saying to the people. So you fall, just get up again. And that's the story of the prodigal son.
Right.
That God gave him. That's why my film is called The Prodigal, because, when the son came to his senses after he lost everything, and that's when he was a far way off, God ran to him.
Right.
And that's what God is going to do. Some of you watching, if you keep falling or sinning, and like I had an issue like several years ago where I had I drank wine. One wasn't enough, two was too many, and God finally said, Meri, you will never accomplish your destiny if you drink alcohol. For me, I couldn't drink, and so I finally had to put it down. I tried many times. But it was during COVID, at the beginning of COVID, that God gave me the ability to say no. And eventually, like Paul used to say, like the things that I don't want to do, I'm doing, and the things that I'm doing, I don't want to do. And he said,
Romans 7. Yeah, that's great.
wretched man that I am. And finally, he was able to say, do as I do, run as I run, follow me. And so for those of you guys who struggle with that, just realize like this caterpillar, like we're becoming this monarch butterfly. And it's in the struggle that causes the fluid from the swollen belly of the butterfly to go into and it gives you the strength to fly. And that's where the struggle comes in. It's like we're going to be flies. We're going to be monarch butterflies for the kingdom.
And do you see, guys, that's the kind of stuff that can come. And see, when you have, see, I think one of the things that you're going to find inside of what Meri Crouley can do, and what you can go to her website, which is mericrowley.com. Is that correct? Correct?
Yeah, but it's right in the middle of America. God told me that years ago. It's MERI, and then Crouley is CROULEY.com. Yes.
So, and when you go to see her website, and you can kind of be a part of her website and have that donations. By the way, she needs donations too. But when you go in that kind of thing, when you go into her site, what you're doing, and you're seeding into that ministry, you're seeding into her. You see the level, the depth that she has inside of the Word. You're part of that, and you're part of the people that she can touch, guys. That is the way, and that's the way, the truth, and the life that we can be a part of. And what happens, instead of the vapid nature of the things that are going to pass away, those are the things that are going to pass away. But we have a new path that's coming into the Hollywood, to the Nashville places, to the other parts that are going to create a new type of movie, of fiction, a new type of a documentary that is going to influence America in a way that we have never seen before. So I thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you, Scott. I know you're so awesome, and I really like to thank you for having me. I've had you on the show times now, and we're here to cross-pollinate. We're there to help others, and you help me, I help you, and that's what the body of Christ and the kingdom of God is, that we help each other.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. We'll talk to you later.